When testing clinical trials, is how you bring a drug to market. And the standard is showing efficacy and safety in well-designed clinical trials. For the past 25 years, we've gotten better and better at designing these trials. Our outcome measures have stayed the same or very similar, which is we look to reduce relapse rate, usually measured as annualized relapse rate. And we do that because when you're doing a clinical trial, especially with a disease as variable as MS, you need to pick an outcome measure that's A, important, and relapse rates are important, and B, that's going to occur frequently enough that you can measure a difference between the treated group and a control group. Annualized relapse rate has served us very well in that regard. A more important but less useful in clinical trial measure is reduction in worsening of disability. It's a very important measure, and some of our studies have shown an effect on that as well, and at least one or two of them have had it as a primary outcome measure. But in early MS, these changes in our disability markers don't occur that often. And so you can miss a good therapeutic effect just because of the natural history of the disease not providing you with a sufficient number of events to be able to measure a difference. That's why annualized relapse rate has been the number one, because usually that will work. As a secondary outcome, we use changes on the MRI. Now, MRI has revolutionized our ability to bring drugs to market because there's something called a phase 2, which is a proof of principle design that you do before you get to the pivotal studies, what are called phase 3 studies that you would take to a regulator like the FDA or Health Canada or EMA. Before you would do those pivotal studies, you do the proof of principle, which tells you something about the safety, and it tells you something about the efficacy, and also dosing information. Well, it turned out from studies initially done at the NIH that if you look at frequent MRIs and reducing that MRI activity with any of the immunomodulating agents we have, and you succeed in doing that, then you almost surely will succeed with a clinical outcome like annualized relapse rate in the pivotal trials. And since it's easier and shorter time frame to do those phase 2s, it became a very good investment. You know, a sponsor would have a good molecule, they'd look at that phase 2, and it succeeded, they say, well, we're going to have a drug that we can get to market. You have to do the studies, but it hasn't failed. So MRI has been very important, not only in that phase 2, but also in looking at the consistency of phase 3. And that's been another feature of all of our pivotal clinical trials, in that when you lay out the metrics you're looking at, annualized relapse first, then maybe change in disability, worsening in disability, and then MRI, T2 lesion load, gadolinium enhancing lesions, brain volumes and such, with the exception of brain volume, which is a little confusing, all those other metrics have always gone in the right direction. Even if they weren't statistically significant, they still supported the primary action. And so they've been very useful metrics. Brain volume has been a little more confusing. And in some studies, it's followed along the therapeutic effect. In other studies, it hasn't, but I think it's a more complicated metric.